6 months into his role as judicial clerk, Marcus Thompson had established himself as an invaluable member of Judge Williams' team. His legal research was thorough, his writing was clear and persuasive, and his insights often helped the judge see cases from new angles. However, his most significant test was about to arrive. The case that would define Marcus's future began with a phone call on a snowy February morning. Judge Williams had just been assigned a complex federal corruption case involving a sitting city councilman, 3 police officers, and a construction company accused of rigging municipal contracts worth over $50 million. "Thompson," Judge Williams called as Marcus arrived in chambers, "we've got a big one. This corruption case is going to be high profile and politically sensitive. The defense attorneys are among the best in the city, and the prosecution team includes federal prosecutors who've been building this case for 3 years." Marcus reviewed the case file with growing excitement and concern. The complexity of the charges, the number of defendants, and the political implications made this one of the most significant cases of Judge Williams' career. "Your Honor," Marcus said, after studying the initial filings, "this case is going to require extensive research on federal corruption statutes, municipal law, and constitutional due process issues. The defense is already filing motions to dismiss based on selective prosecution claims." Judge Williams nodded. "Which is why I'm going to be relying heavily on your research and analysis. This case could set important precedents for how corruption cases are prosecuted in federal court." Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into the case preparation with intensity that impressed even Judge Williams. He researched similar cases from across the country, analyzed complex legal precedents, and prepared detailed briefings on every aspect of federal corruption law. The first major hearing involved motions to dismiss filed by all 5 defendants. Marcus had spent days preparing legal research to help Judge Williams evaluate the arguments. The courtroom was packed with media, attorneys, and political observers when the hearing began. The lead defense attorney was Margaret Foster, one of Chicago's most successful criminal defense lawyers. She had a reputation for aggressive tactics and creative legal arguments that often caught prosecutors off guard. "Your Honor," Foster began, "this case represents a clear example of prosecutorial overreach. The federal government is criminalizing normal political and business relationships that have existed in this city for decades." Marcus watched from his seat at the judge's table as Foster presented her arguments. He had anticipated this line of defense and had prepared extensive research on federal jurisdiction in corruption cases. When Foster finished, the federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Kim, responded with the government's arguments. Kim was known for her meticulous preparation and her success in complex white-collar crime cases. "Your Honor," Kim argued, "the evidence clearly shows a systematic scheme to defraud the city taxpayers through rigged bidding processes and payoffs to public officials. This is exactly the type of corruption that federal statutes were designed to address." Judge Williams listened carefully to both sides before announcing that she would issue a written ruling within 2 weeks. That afternoon, she and Marcus spent hours discussing the legal issues raised during the hearing. "What's your analysis, Thompson?" Judge Williams asked. Marcus had prepared for this moment. "Your Honor, the defense arguments about prosecutorial overreach have some superficial appeal, but they don't address the specific statutory elements of federal corruption charges. The government appears to have evidence of interstate commerce involvement through the construction contracts, which establishes federal jurisdiction. What about the constitutional issues Foster raised?" Marcus pulled out his research notes. "The defense claims of selective prosecution are problematic because they haven't provided evidence that similar cases weren't prosecuted. The standard for proving selective prosecution is very high under federal case law." Judge Williams was impressed by the depth of Marcus's analysis. "Write up your research and recommendations. I want a comprehensive brief covering all the legal issues by Friday." Marcus spent the next 4 days producing what would become one of the most thorough legal analyses of his career. The brief covered federal corruption law, jurisdictional issues, constitutional challenges, and relevant case precedents from across the country. When Judge Williams issued her ruling denying the motions to dismiss, several legal observers noted the sophisticated legal reasoning and comprehensive research that supported the decision. The ruling became a model for how corruption cases should be analyzed under federal law. However, Marcus's work on the case was far from over. As the trial date approached, new challenges emerged that would test his legal skills and ethical judgment. 3 weeks before trial, Marcus discovered something troubling while reviewing prosecution evidence. In a batch of financial documents, he found records suggesting that one of the key prosecution witnesses might have his own undisclosed financial connections to the defendants. Marcus spent an entire night reviewing the documents and cross-referencing them with other evidence in the case. By morning, he was convinced that the witness had failed to disclose potential conflicts of interest that could undermine his credibility. The discovery put Marcus in a difficult position. The witness was crucial to the prosecution's case, and his testimony was needed to prove the conspiracy charges against all 5 defendants. But if the witness had undisclosed conflicts, both the prosecution and defense had a right to know. Marcus brought his findings to. 2 weeks after the incident with Sterling, Marcus Thompson found himself sitting in chambers with Judge Williams, reviewing case files and legal briefs. The transition from security guard to judicial clerk had been swift but challenging. He was learning that working directly with a federal judge required a completely different set of skills than patrolling courthouse hallways. "Thompson," Judge Williams said, looking up from a complex civil rights case, "I need your opinion on something." Marcus had been studying the same case file, analyzing the legal arguments from both sides. The case involved a whistleblower who had exposed corruption in a major city contract, only to face retaliation from city officials. "The plaintiff has a strong case under federal whistleblower protection statutes," Marcus replied. "But the defense is arguing that the disclosure was made improperly through media channels rather than through official channels." Judge Williams nodded approvingly. "What's your analysis of that argument?" Marcus had spent the previous evening researching similar cases and reviewing the relevant statutes. The defense argument has some merit under traditional interpretations, but recent circuit court decisions have expanded protection for whistleblowers who have reasonable belief that official channels would be ineffective or dangerous. "Exactly right," Judge Williams said with satisfaction. "You're developing excellent legal instincts, Thompson." The work was demanding but exciting. Marcus found himself researching complex legal issues, drafting preliminary opinions, and helping Judge Williams prepare for difficult cases. His nights were still filled with law school classes, but now his days were spent applying legal principles in real situations. Meanwhile, the Sterling case had generated significant attention in the legal community. The Illinois State Bar Association had suspended Sterling's license pending a full investigation, and federal prosecutors were pursuing criminal charges for both witness intimidation and threatening a federal judge. Marcus had testified before a federal grand jury about what he had witnessed and recorded. The experience had been nerve-wracking, but it reinforced his commitment to pursuing a career in criminal prosecution. "Thompson," Judge Williams said during one of their morning briefings, "I've been getting calls from some interesting people about you." Marcus looked up from the case file he was reviewing. "What kind of calls, Your Honor?" "The U.S. Attorney's Office has been asking about you. Apparently word has gotten around about your role in the Sterling case and your work as my clerk." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The U.S. Attorney's Office handled federal prosecutions and was widely considered one of the most prestigious places for a young prosecutor to begin their career. "They want to know if you'd be interested in a summer internship next year while you finish law school," Judge Williams continued. "It would be a paid position, which I know is important for your situation." The offer was beyond what Marcus had ever imagined possible. Just a few weeks earlier, he had been worried about making ends meet while finishing school. Now doors were opening that could lead to exactly the kind of career he had always dreamed of. "Your Honor, I don't know what to say. This is incredible." Judge Williams smiled. "You've earned this, Thompson. Your work here has been exceptional, and your character is exactly what the legal system needs. However, the newfound attention also brought unexpected challenges. Some attorneys who regularly appeared in Judge Williams' courtroom began treating Marcus with a mixture of resentment and suspicion. They weren't comfortable with the idea that a former security guard was now influencing judicial decisions. One afternoon, Marcus encountered David Chen, a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Chen had been representing clients in Judge Williams's courtroom for over a decade and clearly resented the changes he perceived in the court's operations. "So you're the security guard who thinks he's a lawyer now," Chen said dismissively as they passed in the courthouse hallway. Marcus stopped and turned to face him. "I'm Judge Williams's clerk, Mr. Chen. Is there something I can help you with?" Chen's expression was condescending. "I've been practicing law longer than you've been alive, kid. I don't need help from someone who was checking bags at the metal detector a month ago." Other attorneys and courthouse staff had gathered to watch the confrontation. Marcus realized that this was a test of whether he could handle the political and social aspects of his new position. "Mr. Chen," Marcus replied calmly, "I respect your experience and your reputation, but everyone in this courthouse is here to serve justice regardless of their background or how they got here." Chen laughed harshly. "Justice? You cost Robert Sterling his career over a simple conversation with a witness. That's not justice. That's grandstanding." Marcus felt anger rising but kept his voice level. "Mr. Sterling lost his career because he chose to intimidate a witness and threaten a federal judge. Those were his choices, not mine. Sterling was one of the best criminal defense attorneys in this city," Chen continued. "The system is worse off without him." A new voice entered the conversation. "The system is better off without attorneys who break the law." Everyone turned to see Judge Williams approaching. She had overheard the exchange and decided to intervene. "Judge Williams," Chen said, immediately changing his tone to one of professional respect, "I was just having a discussion with your clerk about the Sterling matter." Judge Williams looked directly at Chen. "Mr. Chen, in my 15 years on the bench, I have never had a clerk who demonstrated better legal judgment or stronger moral character than Mr. Thompson. If you have concerns about the operations of my courtroom, you can schedule a meeting through proper channels." Chen realized he had overstepped and tried to backtrack. "Your Honor, I meant no disrespect to the court. I was simply expressing concern about recent changes in courthouse dynamics." "The only change in dynamics," Judge Williams replied firmly, "is that witness intimidation and judicial threats are now properly reported and prosecuted. I would think that any ethical attorney would support those changes." After Chen retreated, Judge Williams turned to Marcus. "How did that feel?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Uncomfortable but necessary, Your Honor. I understand that some people are going to resent my rapid advancement, but I can't let that affect my work or my commitment to doing the right thing." Judge Williams nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right attitude. You're going to face challenges throughout your legal career, Thompson. Some people will question your qualifications, your background, or your right to be where you are. The key is to let your work speak for itself." That evening, Marcus stayed late in chambers to finish preparing briefs for the next day's hearings. As he worked alone in the quiet courthouse, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few weeks. He thought about Miss Rodriguez, who had successfully testified in the case against Sterling's former client. The businessman's son had been convicted of vehicular manslaughter and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Justice had been served because Marcus had been willing to stand up for what was right. He thought about Sterling, whose legal career was over and who was facing federal prison time. It was a cautionary tale about how quickly someone could destroy their life and career through poor choices and criminal behavior. Most importantly, he thought about the opportunities that now lay before him. The summer internship with the U.S. Attorney's Office could lead to a permanent position after graduation. His work with Judge Williams was providing invaluable experience and connections in the legal community. As Marcus prepared to leave for the evening, Judge Williams returned to chambers to collect some files. "Working late again?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor. I want to make sure the brief on the Johnson case is perfect." Judge Williams smiled. "Thompson, you don't have to prove yourself every single day. You've already demonstrated that you belong here." Marcus looked up from his computer. "Your Honor, I'll never take this opportunity for granted. 3 weeks ago, I was a security guard who wasn't sure how he was going to finish law school. Now I'm working with one of the most respected judges in the federal system and have a chance at my dream job." Judge Williams paused in gathering her files. "Thompson, I want you to understand something important. You didn't get these opportunities because I felt sorry for you, or because you were in the right place at the right time. You got them because you demonstrated exceptional legal knowledge, moral courage, and sound judgment under pressure." As Marcus finally headed home that night, He realized that his journey was just beginning. The incident with Sterling had been a turning point, but it was what he did with the opportunities that followed that would determine the course of his legal career. The silence in courtroom 4A was deafening. Sterling realized immediately that his threat against Judge Williams had been a catastrophic mistake, but it was too late to take back the words. His face went from red to pale as he understood the legal consequences of threatening a federal judge. Judge Williams stood slowly from behind the defense table where she had been preparing for her morning session. Her movements were deliberate and controlled, but Marcus could see the barely contained fury in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling," she said in a voice that was dangerously quiet, "you have just committed a federal crime in front of witnesses. Threatening a judge is a felony that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in federal prison." Sterling tried to backtrack. "Your Honor, I didn't mean that as a threat. I was simply stating that I have professional relationships in the legal community." Marcus stepped forward. "Your Honor, I believe the exact words were, 'I have connections in this city that you don't want to cross.' In the context of this conversation, that constitutes intimidation of a judicial officer under Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. 115. Judge Williams looked at Marcus with a mixture of amazement and respect. Here was a courthouse security guard who not only knew state criminal law but was now quoting federal statutes with perfect accuracy. "Thompson," she said, "I owe you an apology. You were right to intervene and I was wrong to try to stop you." Sterling made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, this is all getting blown out of proportion. Perhaps we could discuss this matter privately in your chambers." "Absolutely not," Judge Williams replied firmly. "This matter will be handled in full compliance with the law. Thompson, please call courthouse security and have them escort Mr. Sterling to a holding cell. I'm also calling the FBI to investigate both the witness intimidation and the threat against this court." Marcus reached for his radio, but Sterling raised his hands. "Wait, please. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding here." Judge Williams shook her head. "The only misunderstanding was mine, Mr. Sterling. I initially thought that Thompson had overstepped his authority, when in fact he was the only person in this room acting with proper respect for the law." As Marcus called for backup security, Miss Rodriguez approached Judge Williams. "Your Honor, I want to thank the security guard. I was so scared and I didn't know what to do." "Miss Rodriguez," Judge Williams said gently, "I want you to know that you will have full protection from this court. I'm going to assign a victim's advocate to work with you, and will make sure you feel safe throughout this entire process." 2 additional security officers arrived within minutes. Marcus briefed them quickly on the situation while Judge Williams began making phone calls to report Sterling's crimes to the appropriate authorities. Sterling was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence, but his legal career was effectively over. Threatening a witness was bad enough, but threatening a federal judge was a career-ending mistake that would likely result in prison time. After Sterling was removed from the courtroom, Judge Williams turned to Marcus. "Thompson, I need to understand something. How does a security guard know federal criminal statutes and evidence law better than some attorneys who appear in my courtroom?" Marcus smiled modestly. "I've been studying law for 3 years, Your Honor. I work security to pay for school, but my real passion is the law. I want to be a prosecutor someday." "What's your GPA?" Judge Williams asked. 3.9, Your Honor. I'm ranked second in my class." Judge Williams sat down heavily in the judge's chair. "Thompson, I made a serious error in judgment today. I almost let a lawyer intimidate a witness and get away with it because I was more concerned with maintaining authority than ensuring justice." Marcus shook his head respectfully. "Your Honor, you corrected the situation as soon as you understood what was really happening. That's what good judges do." "But you understood what was happening immediately," Judge Williams pointed out. "You risked your job to protect a witness even when I ordered you to back down. That takes courage and principle." Miss Rodriguez, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, spoke up. "Your Honor, if Mr. Thompson hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened. I was ready to change my testimony just to make Mr. Sterling stop threatening me." Judge Williams felt a chill at those words. If Marcus hadn't intervened, a potentially guilty person might have gone free while an innocent victim was denied justice. The implications were staggering. "Thompson," she said, "tell me about your plans after law school." Marcus straightened up. "I want to work in the prosecutor's office, Your Honor. I believe in justice and I want to help protect people who can't protect themselves." What's preventing you from achieving that goal? Marcus hesitated. Honestly, Your Honor, money. I'm supporting my younger sister through college while paying for my own education. I need to keep working security to pay the bills, which means it takes me longer to finish school. Judge Williams was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she made a decision that would change Marcus's life forever. Thompson, I want to make you an offer. How would you like to work as my judicial clerk while you finish law school? Marcus stared at her in shock. Judicial clerkships were incredibly prestigious positions that usually went to the top students from the best law schools. They were stepping stones to the most elite legal careers, Your Honor. I don't understand. I'm just a security guard who's still in law school. You're a law student who showed more legal judgment and moral courage in the last hour than some attorneys show in their entire careers. Judge Williams replied. You knew the law, you applied it correctly, and you did the right thing even when it was difficult. Miss Rodriguez smiled for the first time since the ordeal began. Mr. Thompson saved me from making a terrible mistake. He deserves good things to happen to him. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. An hour earlier, he had been facing contempt charges and possible job loss. Now, one of the most respected judges in Chicago was offering him a position that could launch his legal career. Your Honor, he said carefully. Are you sure about this? I still have a year left in law school. Judge Williams nodded. I'm absolutely sure. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of legal mind and moral character that this court system needs. Besides, you already know more law than half the attorneys who appear before me. As they spoke, the courthouse began to fill with the usual morning activity. Other judges, attorneys, and court staff were arriving for the day's proceedings, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded in courtroom 4A. Marcus looked around the courtroom where his life had just changed completely. A few hours earlier, he had been a security guard working his way through law school. Now he was about to become a judicial clerk for one of the most respected judges in the federal system. But more importantly, he had learned something valuable about himself and about justice. Sometimes doing the right thing requires taking risks and standing up to authority, even when the consequences might be severe. Judge Williams felt her anger rising as she stared at Marcus Thompson. In 15 years on the bench, no courthouse employee had ever directly disobeyed her orders. The security guard was standing his ground, which was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. She couldn't decide which. Thompson, you are in contempt of court, Judge Williams declared, her voice echoing through the empty courtroom. I am ordering you to report to the courthouse administrator immediately. Marcus nodded calmly. I understand, Your Honor. But first, I need to make sure Miss Rodriguez is safe and that this incident is properly reported. Sterling stepped forward, sensing an opportunity to regain control of the situation. Your Honor, I demand that this security guard be removed immediately. His accusations are baseless and defamatory. I was simply having a normal conversation with a witness. Judge Williams looked between the three people in her courtroom. Something about the situation didn't feel right to her, but she had to maintain order and respect for the court's authority. She had spent years building her reputation as a fair but firm judge, and she couldn't let a security guard undermine that authority. Miss Rodriguez, Judge Williams said, turning to the young woman who had remained silent during the confrontation. Is there anything you need to report about your conversation with Mr. Sterling? Maria Rodriguez was 22 years old and worked as a waitress at a restaurant downtown. She had witnessed a hit-and-run accident 3 months earlier and had agreed to testify about what she saw. The case involved Sterling's client, a wealthy businessman's son who had been drinking before the accident that killed a pedestrian. Maria looked nervously between the judge, the attorney, and the security guard. She was afraid of Sterling and what he might do to her or her family, but she was also afraid of lying under oath. She had been raised to tell the truth even when it was difficult. Maria began, then stopped. She looked at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging nod. Your Honor, Marcus said, Miss Rodriguez is clearly intimidated. I suggest that any further discussion about her testimony should happen with a court-appointed victim's advocate present. Judge Williams was becoming more irritated by the minute. Thompson, you are not an attorney. You do not get to make suggestions about how this court operates. But even as she said it, Judge Williams realized that Marcus had made a legally sound suggestion. Victims' advocates were routinely appointed in cases where witnesses might be subject to intimidation. The fact that a security guard knew this procedure was unusual, but it wasn't wrong. Sterling sensed that the situation was slipping away from him. Your Honor, I object to any implication that I was intimidating this witness. I am a member of the Illinois State Bar in good standing, and I resent these accusations from an unqualified courthouse employee. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Both Judge Williams and Sterling stared at him in shock. I always carry this during my rounds, Marcus explained calmly. It's part of our security protocol to document any unusual incidents. I have Mr. Sterling's entire conversation with Miss Rodriguez recorded. The color drained from Sterling's face. Judge Williams felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the implications of what Marcus was saying. You recorded a private conversation without consent? Sterling demanded, though his voice had lost much of its confidence. Marcus shook his head. Illinois is a one-party consent state for recordings, and Miss Rodriguez gave me permission to document the incident for her protection. Also, there's no expectation of privacy in a public courthouse. Judge Williams stared at Marcus with new eyes. Not only did he know criminal law, but he also understood evidence law and constitutional law. This wasn't the behavior of a typical security guard. Thompson, she said slowly, what is your background? I'm a third-year law student at Chicago, Kent, Your Honor, Marcus replied. I work security to pay for school and to support my sister's education. The revelation hit Judge Williams like a physical blow. She had been treating a law student like an ignorant security guard, and worse, she had been protecting what appeared to be actual witness intimidation. Sterling tried one more desperate gambit. Your Honor, even if this guard is a law student, he has no authority to interfere with attorney-client relationships. I demand that recording be confiscated as illegally obtained evidence. Marcus looked directly at Sterling. There was no attorney-client relationship between you and Miss Rodriguez, counselor. She's not your client. She's a witness for the prosecution. What you were engaged in was witness intimidation, which is a Class 3 felony under Illinois law. Judge Williams felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything Marcus was saying was legally correct, and his calm, professional demeanor was in stark contrast to Sterling's increasingly desperate behavior. Miss Rodriguez, Judge Williams said gently, I want you to know that you are under the court's protection. No one is allowed to threaten or intimidate you regarding your testimony. Maria nodded gratefully, tears still in her eyes. Thank you, Your Honor, I was so scared. He said that if I testified, bad things might happen to my family. Sterling made one final attempt to control the situation. Your Honor, I never made any threats. This is all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by an overzealous security guard who thinks he knows the law. Marcus looked at Judge Williams and spoke quietly but clearly. Your Honor, I have the recording and Miss Rodriguez can testify about what happened. But more importantly, this kind of behavior threatens the integrity of our entire justice system. If witnesses are too afraid to tell the truth, then justice becomes impossible. Judge Williams realized that she was at a crossroads. She could continue to support Sterling and try to maintain the authority she thought she was protecting, or she could acknowledge that Marcus had done the right thing, even though he had disobeyed her direct order. She looked at Sterling, whose expensive suit and confident manner had initially impressed her. Then she looked at Marcus, whose quiet dignity and legal knowledge had surprised her completely. Mr. Sterling, Judge Williams said finally, I think you should leave my courtroom now, and I suggest you contact your client about finding new representation, because I will be referring this matter to the State Bar Association for investigation. Sterling's face turned red with anger and humiliation. Your Honor, you're making a serious mistake. I have connections in this city that you don't want to cross. The moment the words left Sterling's mouth, everyone in the room knew he had made a fatal error. Judge Williams's expression changed from conflicted to absolutely furious. Mr. Sterling, she said in a voice that could have frozen fire, did you just threaten a sitting judge in open court? Marcus stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Sterling and the judge, ready to act if necessary. The situation had just escalated beyond witness intimidation to threatening a federal judge. Marcus Thompson had been working as a courthouse security guard for 3 years when his world changed forever on a rainy Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago. At 28 years old, Marcus stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a quiet demeanor that made people feel safe around him. His uniform was always pressed, his badge polished, and his reputation spotless among the court staff. That morning started like any other. Marcus arrived at the Cook County Courthouse at 6:30 a.m., an hour before his shift officially began. He liked the quiet time to walk through the building, check the security systems, and prepare for another day of managing the chaos that came with one of the busiest courthouses in the country. Judge Patricia Williams was known throughout the courthouse as both brilliant and demanding. She had been on the bench for 15 years and had a reputation for running her courtroom with military precision. Everyone who worked in her courtroom knew the rules, and breaking them was not an option. She expected perfection from everyone, from the court reporters to the cleaning staff. The trouble began when Marcus noticed something unusual during his morning rounds. As he walked past courtroom 4A, Judge Williams's domain, he heard raised voices coming from inside. The courtroom was supposed to be empty at this early hour. Marcus checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. No hearings were scheduled until 9 a.m. Marcus quietly pushed open the heavy wooden door and peered inside. He saw a man in an expensive suit shouting at a young woman who appeared to be crying. The woman looked like she might be a witness or maybe a victim in an upcoming case. The man was clearly agitated, pointing his finger at her and making threatening gestures. "You better change your story or you'll regret it," the man was saying. "My client has a lot of influence in this city, and you don't want to make enemies." Marcus recognized the man as Robert Sterling, one of the city's most expensive defense attorneys. Sterling was known for his aggressive tactics and his ability to get wealthy clients out of trouble. What Marcus was witnessing looked like witness intimidation, which was a serious crime. The young woman, who couldn't have been more than 22, was shaking as she tried to respond. "But I have to tell the truth," she said through her tears. "I saw what happened that night." Sterling moved closer to her, his voice becoming more menacing. "Truth is a luxury you can't afford, sweetheart. Think about your family. Think about your job. Think about your future." Marcus knew he had to act. Witness intimidation was not only illegal, but went against everything the justice system stood for. He had taken an oath when he became a security guard to protect everyone in the courthouse, including witnesses who came forward to testify. He stepped into the courtroom, his hand resting on his radio. "Excuse me," Marcus said in a firm but calm voice. "Sir, you need to step away from the witness." Sterling spun around, his face red with anger. "Who do you think you are? This is a private conversation." "This is a public courthouse," Marcus replied. "And what you're doing looks like witness intimidation to me." The young woman used the distraction to move toward the door, clearly relieved that someone had intervened. Sterling's expression changed from anger to calculation as he realized the situation had become complicated. "You're just a security guard," Sterling said with a sneer. "You don't understand legal matters. This woman and I were having a discussion about her testimony. That's perfectly legal." Marcus had been studying law at night for 2 years, working toward his degree while supporting his younger sister through college. He knew exactly what he had witnessed. "Threatening a witness to change their testimony is a felony," he said. "And I just heard you do exactly that." Sterling laughed dismissively. "Prove it. It's your word against mine, and I'm a respected attorney in this city. You're nobody." Before Marcus could respond, Judge Williams walked into the courtroom. She had arrived early to prepare for a complex case that was starting that morning. When she saw the scene in her courtroom, her security guard confronting one of the city's most prominent attorneys while a distressed young woman stood near the door, her expression darkened. "What is going on in my courtroom?" Judge Williams demanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Sterling immediately switched to his courtroom manner, straightening his tie and putting on a professional smile. "Your Honor, I was simply speaking with Miss Rodriguez about her upcoming testimony. Your security guard here has misunderstood the situation and is interfering with my client's right to prepare for trial." Judge Williams looked at Marcus with disapproval. She had always appreciated his professionalism, but she also knew that security guards were not supposed to interfere with attorney-client relationships, even if they occurred in unusual circumstances. "Guard Thompson," she said sternly, "you are not authorized to interrupt legal discussions between attorneys and witnesses. You have overstepped your authority." Marcus felt his heart sink. He had expected the judge to understand the seriousness of what he had witnessed. Instead, she was treating him like he had made a mistake. But he couldn't let Sterling intimidate the witness, even if it meant facing consequences. "Your Honor, with respect, I witnessed Mr. Sterling threatening Miss Rodriguez to change her testimony. He told her to think about her family and her future if she didn't change her story. That's witness intimidation under Illinois Criminal Code Section 32-4. Judge Williams stared at Marcus in surprise. Security guards didn't usually quote criminal codes. Sterling's confident expression faltered slightly as he realized the guard might know more than he had assumed. "You're out of line, Thompson," Judge Williams said, though her voice had lost some of its harsh edge. "Return to your duties immediately." Marcus looked at the young woman who was still trembling near the door. He looked at Sterling, who was trying to regain his composure. Then he looked at Judge Williams, a judge he had always respected but who was now ordering him to ignore what he had witnessed. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I can't do that," Marcus said quietly. "I took an oath to protect everyone in this courthouse. That includes witnesses who are being threatened." The courtroom fell silent. Everyone knew that disobeying a direct order from a judge was serious. It could cost Marcus his job and potentially result in contempt charges. But Marcus had made his choice and he was prepared to face the consequences.